We're your hosts, Bridget Querns,
And Beth Orr.
and we welcome you to Click Moments in Passionate Pursuits, The Unfolding, where intuitively guided conversations are followed with feral faith, enthusiasm, and joy, bringing new insights, inspiration, and perspectives along the way. And today I am doing the intro because Beth has no idea what our topic is on purpose, because what I was really hoping for was to get a fresh perspective, a hot take out of her, because I know that we have such aligned, energetic conversations when we're not recording. And usually that's when we come up with these topics on the fly and we just run with them. So the topic is the undiscussables. And I just want to see how this has shown up in your life, Beth, and what it might look like to do this topic differently than we have in the past.
Ooh, well, first of all, I love this topic. I can tell you that my background with this came from creating a workshop at my last organization around resiliency through difficult conversations, because there were a lot of, when you're working in social services and you have, or anytime you're working in an organization where you have dynamics between team members that have sometimes competing demands, even though there's a larger organizational goal and vision, but you have within departments these competing demands that may make it difficult to align. There's a lot of emotions around it. There's a lot of misunderstanding, or oftentimes why something is undiscussable is because a topic is deeper than our surface understanding. We haven't necessarily understood the undercurrent, and especially usually it's undiscussable because there's an emotion that's not allowed or is uncomfortable for us. And so when we're talking about something that we have an invested interest in and somebody else does also, and there are uncomfortable emotions that come up, it can be challenging because we don't want to feel that way. And so what I had done was I came up with a workshop to talk about these things so that we would all, not saying it was perfect, but it definitely gave us a framework and a starting place so that we could identify, ooh, these are the elements that somebody can expect and anticipate when talking about the undiscussables or difficult conversations. And now that we know this, we can have some agreed upon kind of rules of engagement so that it makes this, some of the emotions normalized, and it gives us some tools to be able to have these conversations. So that's kind of my background to this topic. But again, what I found was it was always we don't want to discuss things because we have an invested interest and there's so much pain or emotions that comes along with bringing up this topic. There's a lot to lose when we're talking about this, right?
Yeah. So my experience with this topic is totally outside the realm of organizations, of business, of any of that. And the challenge that I've faced is that in these conversations, I didn't have a framework for entering into this discussion. What I usually found happening was I would find myself in a room or at a table, usually in informal discussions, where a topic was being floated that personally affected me deeply. And I felt as though the way the topic was being discussed or handled was that the individuals discussing the topic were passionate about it, but didn't have any personal connection to it. So here I am with a deep personal connection to it, really passionate about it because of that, and wanting to enter into this conversation, but being stuck or scared as to how that was going to come across when I did enter this conversation. And I want to put a pin in that because I'd like to talk about that, but I also want to really dig in and let's list what are some of these undiscussable topics we're talking about. Let's do this right away so we get these out and we put words around them, because I think that's part of the problem is we don't even want to say what the undiscussables are. So let's float them. Let's call them out.
Gosh, I'll be honest with you. I'm gonna have to step into my deep to the background because everything's discussable to me now.
Mm,
So what is part of this? Like I just put everything on the table now. But I would say undiscussables. When you're going to do something different than what your family and friends want you to do. So for me, moving across the country, that was undiscussable for me because I knew it was going to present a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear and frustration and all kinds of emotions, sadness. I don't want to make people sad. So I'm more likely, can I just start with instead of actual events, I would say the emotions that are the undertones of undiscussables would be any events, and we can list the events, but the events that make us sad, angry, frustrated, disappointed. I think I said scared, afraid. Um, we can't even like I said anger, but we can't even begin to talk about rage. A whole other emotion. Disrespected, hurt. I mean, all of those kinds of emotions, right? Fear, like I said, like all of those emotions, it's the things that we don't like to feel. Um, and I will also add to that list a kind of weird one. Sometimes we don't talk about really joyous, good things because of the people that we're in company with.
mhm,
So there's been times in my life where I felt it when I first started to accept this life and create this life that I love so much. I felt guilty
mm,
for feeling so much joy and happiness and love all the time. And people kept trying to convince me that that was not true. And it was like, I'm sorry, but it's my experience. And I started to feel guilty that I had created this. And I was like, wait, I'm not going to feel guilty for this because I've given up a lot to create this. It's not like it just came to me. Like I've made these decisions. So there is something too though that we don't want to intentionally hurt other people, and when we know that it's going to present some anxiety when we're feeling good, sometimes we don't bring up that. So it can be undiscussable. So that's why I just mentioned that because I know I'm not the only one who's felt that way.
mhm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. The
How about for
spec
you?
yeah, the
Did I miss some
specific
emotions?
no, I think you did a good job capturing the emotions. I think so the specific conversation, I'm just going to put it out there because this was probably one of the most difficult conversations for me to enter. I want to say it would have been about 11 or 12, maybe 12 years ago now. I'm sitting at a table with a group of young adults at the church that I was currently attending, and they were discussing the um like their perspectives on abortion, right? And everybody had really strong perspectives, and most were against it. And I felt like I can remember it. I can feel it in my body right now. I could remember the feeling of like this heat, this like boiling, just kind of like floating up and up and up and up and up until I could feel my face getting red. And I knew, okay, well, if I don't say something, they're already seeing that I'm having a really strong reaction to this. Whether I say something or not, they know that I'm having a strong reaction. So at that point, I don't even remember, like something took over me, and I I don't think it was very calmly. I think I really firmly said something to the effect of, it's great that you all have such strong perspectives on this, but I want to tell you from the point of view of someone who's had an abortion that you don't get to be my voice for me. And I was like, if you want to know about this, come to me and ask, and I'll tell you. I was just
Mm,
so angry. I was so angry because it was like all these people have these really strong, like It just felt like they all had this moral stance on this issue. And I wanted them to hear what my moral stance was. And I wanted them to try to understand the emotions that were tied into this topic for me. Like, ask me what it was like making that decision. Ask me how I felt when I found out I was pregnant and I was a freshman in college and I had to have a conversation with my parents who were going through a divorce. Ask me. I'll tell you. I'm happy to have this conversation, but no one ever asks the people who've gone through it. They just want to share their perspective and take this moral high ground. And I was really angry. And I know that for every one of me, there are probably 500 others who are sitting in rooms or at tables like that who don't choose to share their voice. And so I'm in the place that I am now, having a voice, getting this public platform to use it to give voice to these issues, that these undiscussables. And I want people to understand that there are so many of us standing in rooms or sitting at tables or not even in the room. We don't get invited into the conversation, who have a voice and want our stories to be part of it. And what do we do? How do we include that?
Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to is that oftentimes part of a reason why something is undiscussable is people have to have the openness and the receptivity to hear somebody else's opinion without there being an already decided outcome of what's right or wrong, right? Like oftentimes there's this real expectation that we have to be right about something. And I don't like, I can't even put my finger on it growing up, but I knew it was there. Like there is this, maybe it is a moral high ground, or there's some sort of, I certainly grew up in a religious background with a religious background, but I didn't feel like the church that I went to that people felt like they were better than somebody else. But I certainly always knew that there were people that weren't speaking right. And we didn't argue, but we just knew it was the way that it was. So there was this like better than, right? Kind of, I won't necessarily say within my church, but maybe, I don't know. But I think there is something to early on, many of us, and definitely now, there is this, and I'm not going to say all the time, but there are groups of people that we see that there's no room to just listen to, like you said, like, what do you think? Like, what's your life been like? What were your belief systems? What did you find that was like, what were you told? Why did you make this decision? Why did you think you could? Like all of these questions, like instead, there's this presumption of we all grew up with the same circumstances and the same opportunities and told the same things. So we should all be on the same page. But yet we know that that's not true. But yet we expect everybody to know right from wrong,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's some of what you're talking to this undiscussable is we can't talk about things with people if we feel like we're going to be judged or that there's no tolerance for our points of view.
Yeah, at the time that I decided to speak up, I honestly, I guess I've grown quite a bit in who I am and my spiritual perspectives and everything. But even then, my goal wasn't to convert their thoughts to one side or the other on the issue. It was just that I felt that they couldn't make an informed decision either way until they heard like a firsthand perspective. And these were people who, I was friends with, who knew me but didn't know my whole story. And I wanted them to see, if nothing else, this issue that you're discussing directly impact someone who you know well. And does that change your perspective or not? It doesn't matter to me, but it does matter to me that you understand that you can't just float a topic like this and stay detached and not recognize the direct impact that it has on people who are very close to you.
So this is interesting. You saying that kind of it pinged me that by definition, when you think of undiscussables, there's an element of to not discuss something means that we're silent about it, and that there are certain things that we're silent about. And oftentimes, when people talk about those things that are undiscussable, the only time they do talk about it is in a forum of a small group of people that they feel like will align with their viewpoints. The only time it's
Yeah.
discussable is when we're aligned. So when what I know about you doesn't match with what we're talking about in an undiscussable on an undiscussable topic, which I'd like to get back to, which we skipped over. You've brought up one, but when you take these undiscussable topics and then you go beyond the culture of silence that I talk about, right? Undiscussable in general is this we're not talking about it unless we're all aligned on the same page. In your circumstance, somebody went beyond the culture of silence. We don't talk about it unless we know it's okay. It's like a little secret society. And then when they brought it out, because they thought everybody was aligned, and then you weren't aligned because it was something about you. From my experience, people start to panic a little bit. There's a bit of like a backtracking. Sometimes people double down. You either see people doubling down and then making their case, and now you're the person who they're focused on, or they backtrack,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But either way, very rarely, unless it's a group of people that I find are really truly open to all sides, it's kind of placating sometimes. It can be very placating, like, oh yeah, well, of course there's a lot of extenuating circumstances. But sometimes, I feel like that's not necessarily from a genuine perspective. But I do think I do want to get to us talking about what it can look like to talk about the undiscussables, because
Yeah.
I don't want to just set up the problem. I want to talk about some solutions. And I also think it's really important for us to acknowledge, um, I don't know, for me, I've probably done it poorly in the past, right? It's an
Oh, I'm
evolution of learning,
sure. I'm sure we
you
all
know?
have. Yeah, I certainly have, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. I think well, you say of course, but I don't know that I think sometimes we can see it as static, our capacity to have these conversations. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that it really takes intention and a willingness to understand why there's a benefit to hearing all sides. And also, for me, one of the reasons why I decided to really, I really try, and I'm not going to say I'm great at this, but I really try to listen more than I speak when it's something that I genuinely don't feel that confident with, because I know that I have a lot to learn, and so I can't learn by speaking. I really do have to listen.
I love that you said listen more than I speak. I think that's a really beautiful approach is cultivating a space where it's safe for others to speak and letting them know that you're just there to listen. And I think my number one habit in this area has been and continues to be getting really curious about where is their gray area? Because I think really often we see these specific topics, these divisive topics, as very black and white, when I think it's just a whole lot of shades of gray.
Mhm.
And I personally try really hard to find the gray areas and to get curious about them because I just want to ask really good questions instead of trying to find all the answers. I think that there are not a whole lot of answers in these topics, but I
Mhm.
think that we can train ourselves and others to ask really great questions. And I think that that sort of falls under maybe the umbrella of listening more than we speak, of asking
Mhm.
more questions than we make statements.
Mhm.
But what else? How else would you approach it?
How else would I approach the undiscussables?
If we're setting up a framework for what this could look like, or how we can
Mhm.
do it better.
One of the keeping it simple, one of the other things that I always say is give the benefit of the doubt. That's a whole framework. Like I prepare myself before I go into a conversation with people that I think that I may have a difference of opinion, or if I don't know that, I really try to, when I feel myself kind of spike or feel a little discomfort, I will immediately tell myself, but I've had to train myself to do this. I will immediately say, um, give people the benefit of the doubt. And what I mean by that, in case it's not completely obvious, is other people have their own sets of beliefs and circumstances and life experiences and personal goals or outcomes that they're hoping for in this particular conversation. So I'm going to presume that there is not a malicious intent and that the feelings that I'm feeling are mine based on my situations, and they didn't spike this, like they literally just had an inconspicuous comment. Or and so if I can give people the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, if I'm choosing to be with this person and they don't, and I don't think that this person has a malicious intent, then I'm just managing with emotional intelligence what's happening in my own body. I can do that. Now, if somebody does have a malicious intent and they're attacking, then you have to ask yourself, why am I in this conversation and trying to have a conversation about it? Like there are just certain people that I won't have conversations about because if we're not on the same page with I care about, like that's one of the things is I care about your feelings and I care about um, what you have to say. I actually, as a side note, I heard somebody say that the other day. I was listening to a I was somewhere and I was watching an interaction and this woman was posturing very strongly and she was like, she goes, "Oh, I don't care about what other people feel." And I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay." And I put a little pin in that. She engaged me with a couple of things and I wasn't mean, but when she asked me my opinion about something, I was just kind of firm and I was just like I didn't engage in the conversation anymore because I was like, we're not even at the same, like we're not gonna be entering at the same place. Because I really do care about people's feelings. Like I don't want to hurt people. And call that what you will, but that's my own personal value system. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. It's just that's my thing. I don't want somebody to feel like it's okay to purposefully hurt me, and I'm not going to hurt somebody else purposefully. You know. So I would say, I mean, like when you have this, whatever it is, you have this agreed upon code of conduct. And I've actually started conversations from that place of let's agree upon some ground rules and let's co-create those. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Like, let's just what's important to you, and I'll tell you what's important to me, and let's have this code of conduct that we say this is how we're going to operate, and then we just both agree to it. And if we don't agree, or somebody says I'm not going to do that, then it's up to one of us to decide: are we engaging in this conversation? Like, I don't have to have a conversation with somebody about anything. I can exit out if I don't think that it's safe for me. And so that's the other thing is, there has to be safety for people to have that kind of conversation. And trust is ideal, but certainly not trust is something that's built, and so you don't always have time for trust. Like when people say, "Oh, I have to have a trusting relationship to have this conversation," I'm like, "Well, gosh, that's like there's a lot of conversations that people have in workplaces and other spaces that they don't necessarily trust somebody because they don't have that kind of relationship yet.
Mhm.
You still have to have those conversations. So benefit of the doubt, ideally a safe place, and safety comes from a set of ground rules that you both agree upon, and possibly, if possible, I would say a neutral location. Because so often people say, well, I'm going to come to your office, you're going to come to my office, and you already are on your own ground. And so if you can create, I've gone into public restaurants and had conversations, difficult conversations, or brought in a third party mediator that was somebody that we both trusted. So because we both trusted them, we knew that that person would remind us of, what was, if there was anything going on with us personally, that we could trust them, and that we trusted the way that they were guiding the conversation.
So I think the reason I felt so drawn to this topic right now is because we're in the holiday season and there are inevitably families and groups getting together where topics are going to come up. And I just want people to feel empowered to be able to enter these conversations in a way that feels safe to them, but to be able to enter these conversations and feel like they have a voice and like they're allowed to speak instead of just having to stay silent in them.
It's interesting what you're talking about, though, because so you're giving an example as the holidays is an undiscussable event, like whatever the dynamics are. But I would say it feels like related to that, but also potentially different topic in that it's really asserting your voice in a time that something feels undiscussable,
Mm,
and asserting your voice in a way that has a calm confidence versus a like pushing to make space. We don't have to push to make space for our voice. Our voice is our voice.
mhm,
And if we put ourselves in environments or situations where our voice isn't heard or respected, then we have the capacity to remove ourselves from that. So that's like a separate, let me give you an example. I used to be in an environment, and I don't want to talk about the specific environment, just out of courtesy. I used to be in an environment where I felt like my voice was respected, I was heard, what I had to say mattered. And then I realized one day I wasn't. The environment had changed. And nothing that I did or anything that I said, everything was starting to come across as defensive. And it was because I realized, oh, this environment needs me to fall in line.
mm,
This environment needs me to believe what they believe, not bring up any kind of dissension. And I realized the only way that I could shift what was happening in my experience was to leave this environment. But that my voice was important. What I had to say did matter, but I'm not going to try to give credibility to my voice and my opinion if somebody doesn't want it. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I actually really appreciate this environment and think it's a wonderful environment, but I didn't fit there anymore.
mm,
And I wasn't going to try to fit someplace that I didn't fit anymore. I had changed. I was who I was. They had changed. And I was like, I have a choice. I can try to beat my head up against this over and
mhm.
over and over again, but that would mean my ego has something to prove. And I was like, mm-mm, mm-mm. So there is something to, if you are going into an environment like the holidays with friends and family, and you're actually at friends and family's house, and there's something that matters to you and they're not listening to you, like either you can take accountability for, ooh, maybe I'm bringing this up in a way that rubs up against people. Maybe I'm saying it in a
Mhm.
snarky way. Maybe I'm saying something and I've got to, like, what can I own? But if I'm like just saying to somebody, like, for example, I can't come tonight to dinner, but I can come in the morning. And somebody says, but we need you to come tonight. I can't come tonight, regardless of what the reason is. You can't. So if everybody's going to feel this way or that way or whatever about it, can you still just come tomorrow and have some leftovers and let everybody have their reaction? Or do you not need to go? Or can you talk to people about how hurtful that is? Or can you ask for people to do it the next day instead? You've got options, but it needs to come from a place of like, this, like, I get to make my decision. Now you get to make yours without any kind of like upset. Like, you don't have to be upset that somebody else can't accommodate for you.
Mm.
Like sometimes we're doing things and people can't accommodate. Okay, we've made our choice. Like, why do we have to take it personal?
I mean, good question, but that's one that I think that a lot of us will continue to wrestle with for a long time.
You mean taking it personal?
Taking it personal. Yeah.
Well, and I think a tool I use often is this true?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like, is this true that somebody's gonna like fall apart if you don't do A, B, and C? And in families, it could be because families are complicated, right? But the reality is the only way you get yourself into a different dynamic with somebody is to get into a different dynamic with somebody.
Mm. Say that again.
The only way you get into a different dynamic with somebody is to get into a different dynamic with somebody.
Yeah. We have to teach them the new dynamic.
Yeah. And not in a you're wrong for wanting this from me kind of perspective.
Mhm.
It's and not in a I'm an adult, I get to do whatever I want to kind of way, or you're not the boss of me. Like these are all things we say that are so hurtful. And it's like I've said those things and it's me fumbling through my autonomy,
Mm.
and once I realize, wait, I'm an adult. I can make whatever decisions I want to make. I'm going to come from a place of kindness. I am going to put the mask on myself first. So if I'm exhausted and people don't know the set of circumstances with why, I don't need them to understand. But if this is my decision, this is my decision. And I'm sorry if it impacts you, but here's what I need to do. And hey, what do you need to do for you? I'm going to support you too. We're going to get through this,
Mhm.
you know? But it's a shift to allowing other people to have their own reactions and have their own sets of needs, but us being able to also have a voice that we get to have. We're adults. If we're living our life, then we're making our decisions.
So I sort of drew up a 3-step process that I want to break down and make really simple and approachable and manageable for people. It's like the way I see it is, how do we get drawn in, or how do we enter these conversations? Once we're in it,
Mm,
how do we structure it? How does that dynamic work? And then how do we exit it with grace? Like, how do we close it out neatly as possible?
yeah, I mean, are you asking?
Yeah.
Okay. For me, when I have these conversations, I start with, "Hey, I have something important to talk to you about. Are you in a space to listen?" So I'm not going to presume that somebody's in a mental space or emotional space. Maybe we need to schedule a time. Their reaction will tell you if they are in a space or not. If they get worked up and spiked, you're going to say, hey, how about we schedule something for it's okay. It's going to be okay. I just want to talk to you about something important to me. Can we schedule something tomorrow or whatever? Do you give people time to attune to it that, that this is a thing? And once you're in a space where whether it's been scheduled or you recognize somebody is in that space and they say, yes, I am in that space, you don't second guess it. They're grown people. So if they say they are, then that's part of helping like get into this dynamic where I'm responsible for me and you're responsible for you is accepting somebody's answer. And if they say yes, and you sense that that's genuine and you feel safe, then I start with I first want to just start with this is important to me. And I hope that you can hear me. I hope that you just listen because I have a lot of emotions about this, and it may bring up a lot of emotions for you. I just need you to know that this is really important to me, and so if you could just listen, I would appreciate that. Right? Just set it up, however, like in whatever that looks like for you, right? But it allows for that person to not come up with a retort, but you're telling them what you need. So right off the bat, you're saying with kindness, can you just listen? This is what I need from you right now. So you're trusting them. And then you're paying attention with are they allowing you to say what you need to say and listen. And then um the second thing is I'm gonna own it. This is how I feel. It's not you make me feel. It's not you did this. It's very it's very much me taking ownership over that. But you can also um if there's a specific incident that's in mind, you can also bring that up. You can say, but be very specific, not vague. Don't be like, you always make me feel this way. Or this is like, be very specific. Yesterday, when we were talking about the holidays, you mentioned that we were all going to meet at 2 o'clock on Friday. But you never asked me if I could meet at 2 o'clock on Friday. You just assumed that I could. I have some things that I'm doing that doesn't work for me. And as long as you're okay with I can't make it, that's fine. But I do want you to know that I would have liked to have been involved in coming up with a time because I really do care about being with the family. And now I can't because it's 2 o'clock on Friday. And the presumption is because I'm an entrepreneur and I have a flexible schedule that I can be flexible all the time. And I can't always be flexible. Sometimes I have things that are set and I can't change this thing on Friday. So I'm gonna miss the holiday. So, like something like that allows for you to say, this is just my perception. It gives the specific time. There's actually a framework it's called SBI. It's situation, behavior, and impact. And it's under 1 minute so
Mm,
that you don't get lengthy in your conversation. So it's situation. Um, I'm feeling hurt, the behavior, because yesterday you mentioned to the family that we were all meeting Friday at 2 o'clock. Impact. I'm not going to be able to make it this holiday. Super clear and specific, right? And we say only make it like a minute because you don't want to go on because people shut down. They can't,
mm,
they don't hear you when they shut down.
mhm.
So then you get into, I just said when they reply and you're like, I just said this and you're saying, well, what about this? And I just said that. And you're like, well, it's because their brain shut down.
Mm,
You gave them too much information, right?
yeah, yeah.
Or
And what
you're too
about,
vague sometimes.
yeah. So what about wrapping these conversations up or exiting with grace, like trying to do as little or no harm ideally as possible?
Like I always just try to acknowledge that I know that it wasn't personal. Like they weren't doing anything intentionally to exclude me or to do any harm to me. So like I'll be like, hey, thank you for listening to me. Like thanking somebody, like thank you for listening to me. Um, I know you know that I love participating in all the family things. I appreciate that you allowed for me to just tell you my truth, and you allowed for me to tell you why I was disappointed. But I'm not upset. You're doing the best you can to try to coordinate 20 people. And, you know, just thanks for listening. Like, I'd
Mm,
love to make it next time. Let me know. Like,
mhm,
I know it maybe even a new thing that I have a schedule. So I'm gonna own it, and I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. And I'm going to thank them for listening when they did, if it was important for me that they listened and they listened, I want to thank them for listening. That's hard when you
yep,
feel attacked or like you've disappointed somebody, you want to backtrack, and it's really hard to stay with somebody and just listen. But that's the most respectful thing that we can do when somebody's hurt. And we didn't mean to. We hurt people all the time. We don't mean to, you know? But the most respectful thing we can do is when they tell us what they need, do that.
mhm. All right, I guess one final thing that I want to touch on is, so if someone's in a situation similar to where I was with this discussion that people were having that they felt really strongly about. Now, obviously, not everyone needs to choose to share their personal experience in a discussion that's happening, but if there's a discussion that is happening and they find themselves in the presence of it, and it's really impactful to them because they have a personal connection to it, what can they do? What are some options there?
Yeah. First, you have to decide in your own mind really quickly, who's this group of people that's in front of me, and do I care about these relationships? If you don't, and you're in a room of people that you're not close with, or you don't have any invested interest in, you have to make a decision. Am I going to risk being vulnerable with a group of people that I ultimately, even if I know these people, do I still care, and am I going to go through this? So that's number one. Sometimes you're just going to listen, and you're going to let it go, and you're going to know these aren't my people. And that's okay. That's okay. We're not everybody's your person. But if you decide that this is a group of people that I really care about and I am grieving, and I'm going to have an ongoing relationship with them, and I cannot look at them the same if I do not have this conversation and voice this, or some part of me will die a little because I didn't stand up for something that was really important for me that I felt like I needed to do. In that moment, honestly, I would utilize that space, and I would just say, is everybody here willing to hear a different opinion that may produce some emotion, like some stronger emotions? Are you willing to hear that? And then see if people are willing to agree. And if they are, say, okay, I've got a difference of opinion, but I'm going to be really vulnerable. So give me just a second. Take 2 or 3 breaths, calm down. What you're doing is you're role modeling to them that that moment is taking a lot for you. You're implying that I need you to listen. This is a lot, right? It's also giving them the opportunity to take a moment and prepare themselves. They sense the magnitude of this, right? And then when you start, it's the SBI, it's right there. It's like, just in this moment. It was unexpected to me, but in this moment, you were all under the presumption that we were all on the same page with this issue, and we're not. The impact to me is I have a difference of opinion, and it wasn't discussed as to, hey, how do people feel about this? The presumption was we were all on the same page. And so I either had to stay quiet, and so you just say where you're at. Like, I had to stay quiet and risk that I did not get to say my truth, or I had to make a decision to trust you guys and to say, this is how I'm experiencing this, and this is how I'm feeling. Furthermore, if you guys would like to know why I feel what I feel, I'm willing to share that. But if you don't want to, I don't want you to placate me. I don't need to share my story if you're not interested in truly having a broader perspective on this issue. I'm not trying to sway you to another side. I don't need you to affirm me. But if you are interested in understanding why somebody else that is part like you in many ways may have a different opinion, I'm willing to share that with you, but I don't need you to say yes to this. I'm only interested in sharing this if you're willing to.
Mhm.
And also not to try to change my perspective, but just to listen. To let people know what your expectations are. I'm not going to be told why this is wrong or why I should be told something different. I'm not going to do that to you. And so these are my like you're setting those ground rules and you're not saying it in a mean accusatory way. You're literally saying it in a calm way. That's why you have to have some breaths. And if you don't think you can have that conversation, you say, can we talk about this again some other time? It's really important to me. I can't do it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
know?
love that. I think that's what I was really looking for, because I feel like there are a lot of these conversations taking place all over the place right now. And usually what happens is it turns into a word fight, and a lot of people end up really wounded, versus it being a space that could be really productive and beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to this in that there was somebody in my life that is family and really important to me, and um, there's not many people that I have conversations with or close that I'm close to that I have a dramatic difference of opinion that it's like it's something like really big to the fundamentals of who I am and my morals and beliefs and values and all that kind of stuff. Like most of the people around me we're pretty aligned. But certainly I have conversations with people in passing that we have differences of opinion and it's okay, right? But I have this one person in my life that I was like, okay, we have some really dramatic differences of opinion. And there was a set of circumstances that came up where I set my boundaries and I said, I can't have this conversation. I don't really this doesn't feel good because I feel like you're talking down to me and you're telling me what I should believe, but I have a set of reasons and I could tell you why if you were interested, like that I have a difference of opinion. And instead, this person kept telling me, what do you mean you have a difference of opinion? And was really angry and judgmental and aggressive and kept trying to tell me why I should feel something different without ever asking me why I felt what I felt. And it got to the point where it was so much aggression, like after like 15 minutes, that I could feel myself shrinking, hurt. It was not healthy. And so I said in the middle of this rant, and I say all of this because if you're somebody who does bring up something and somebody has a really strong reaction and you're getting hurt and harmed and you're being talked over and you're not being listened to, I'm just giving this as an example of how to get out, maybe not gracefully, but it is a way to get out without doing harm, right? Intentional harm. So I said to this person, I need you to really calm, even though I wasn't feeling calm, my heart was racing. And I said, I need you to know that even though my voice is calm, I need you to hear me tell you that my heart is beating fast. What you're saying is hurting me. It's really disrespectful. And I need you to stop yelling at me and talking to me this way. And they didn't. And I said it one more time and they didn't. And so I said, I'm hanging up the phone now. I want you to know that I love you and that I care about you, but I will not let anybody talk to me this way, and that includes you. I'm hanging up the phone. And they're like, "Don't hang up the phone." And I went click. And then they called and called and called and called and left voicemails. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done. A couple of days later, I left a voicemail that was really loving. And I just said, I love you. I care about you. Here are the new rules to our relationship. I listed out those. And I said, I'm going to always enter into this relationship with you in this way. I'm willing to listen to your list of how you want like how you want this to go, but I'm not going to do this anymore to where I get to be hurt while you're feeling up here. That I'm not doing that. And it took this person 6 months to call me. okay, that was hard. I had to self-manage. I had to be really disappointed. I had to grieve in my own way that this person wasn't going to be able to meet those needs. That person will never know. Finally, they called me. Everything was fine. They were adhering to the rules as I had set it up. They didn't have any more to offer. We're fine. But my point is we get to say, this is how you treat me. Like I'm not gonna be treated poorly. Even if that's our dynamic, I get to get a different dynamic. I get to say that I'm not doing this. And so we get to change our mind at any time. And especially if it's unhealthy. I'm not saying that this is if you want to treat somebody poorly, that somebody should tail to you in that situation. I'm talking about basic human dignity and kindness that we get to say how we're treated. And if somebody wants to dominate, um, you're gonna have to find your group of people that you can do that with. But I wouldn't suggest that people align with a domination or overtaking kind of stance in a conversation or relationship.
Well, thank you for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for guiding it and interesting to have a topic that is unknown. And thank you
Yeah,
for being vulnerable with
yeah,
your own part of your life that you experienced.
yeah, of course. I think it's really I feel very blessed and privileged that I get to discuss things like this and that it doesn't affect my safety or my ability to show up in my community. And so I will commit myself to using the platforms that I have to continue doing that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, a special thanks to Asheville artist Melissa Moss for our cover art. You can learn more about Melissa and her work at melissamossart.com. And thanks to Cloud Cult for our podcast music from their song, There's So Much Energy in Us. Learn more about them at cloudcult.com. And of course, to our listeners and viewers, thank you for showing up and for sharing this space with us. And until next time, friends, peace, love, and light.